Okay, guys, let's take a look at chapter 14. Chapter 14, if you're following along in your book, starts on page 282. On page 282. What we're looking at in chapter 14, as the title says, we're looking at basic dosage by body weight. In this particular chapter, what we mean by that is there are a lot of medications, in particularly pediatric medications, that say things along the lines of this. It says that you see the dosage on the medication label on the bottle that says 5 milligrams per kilogram, something along those lines. And like I said, a lot of times this happens with pediatric medications because sometimes, depending on the medicine, depending on the strength of the medicine and what it is, certain kids can take a certain amount based on how much they weigh. So in this particular example that you guys see here, where I have 5 milligrams per kilogram, what that means is that every kid that weighs, for every kilogram that they weigh, they can take 5 milligrams of that drug. So for instance, if a patient weighed 1 kilogram, they would therefore then be able to, they would just have to take that dosage, the 5 milligrams. Where if they weighed twice that amount and weighed 2 kilograms, they would then take 10 milligrams. They would have to take, twice the amount of the dosage. If we were to keep going, if they weighed 3 kilograms, then they would have to take 3 times that amount and would have to take 15 milligrams. And you guys can see where I'm going with this. And that's what we're going to get into in a little bit later. But in starting this chapter out, what this book starts with is, one, normally when we step on a scale, our scales do not measure us in kilograms. For everybody who's been on a scale knows that our scales in our doctor's offices measure us in pounds. And so the first part of this chapter is to make sure we're pretty comfortable with converting pounds to kilograms. So if you flip over to page 284, that's what we're doing on that page. We're looking at knowing that conversion. Now this is just a refresher back to chapter 4 and how we perform our conversions using proportions. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through one of those conversions, and then I'm going to go over with you kind of an easier way to focus on this chapter. So going back to what we did in chapter 4, if I'm trying to convert pounds to kilograms, so for instance, in just walking you guys through the example that they have on page 284, in that yellow box there, it says that we have a client that weighs 32 pounds. Okay, but again, our dosages are based on kilogram weight. So again, most healthcare measurements are going to be in in metrics instead of our household units. So we have to take these pounds and convert them over to kilograms. So you can see how this is kind of already looking like what we did in chapter 4, one of those questions in converting pounds to kilograms. We do need a known for that, and if you were to, I know it is there in front of you in that example, but it's also on our charts, on our conversion charts, which I'm sure some of you guys still have those out. On our conversion charts, it says that in the second section down, in the weight section, it says, the first one says 1 pound 1 pound is 16 ounces. The next conversion says 1 kilogram equals 2.2 pounds. So there's our known for this particular question. So if I were to set this up using proportions, just like we did in chapter 4, I would use my known as 32 pounds. I know they're not setting, the book doesn't set it up the exact same way I do. But again, as long as in proportions, if you're following the same rules, known on one side, unknown on the other, make sure your units match up. You're going to get the same answer either way. So I'm going to do it how we did in chapter 4. So I put my unknown down first, 32 pounds over X amount of kilograms. And then over on the other side, I'm going to put that known down, again, making sure pounds are across from pounds, kilograms are across from kilograms. So therefore, my 2.2 is going to go on top, and the 1 is going to go on the bottom, and that's that known from the chart. So again, our method for solving these particular types of conversions, we cross multiply the side that's opposite of our x. So we're going to take 32 times 1, which we know 32 times 1 is 32. And then from there, we'll take 32 divided by 2.2. Again, you just divide by what's remaining. And that's going to give us about 14.5, as you can see there in the book. They got that answer that way. So they got the same answer we did. Now, and that's correct. So what that means is 32 pounds is the same thing as 14.5 kilograms. So therefore, in these questions where we see that a patient again, particularly a child, this patient can take so many milligrams per kilogram of weight, they're going to have to take 14.5 times that amount because they weigh 14.5 times that 1 kilogram. So that's our first goal here. Is first, let's make sure that we can convert pounds to kilograms. Now, I told you guys, now this is a refresher from chapter 4. However, in this chapter, all we're doing is converting pounds to kilograms every single time. So our setup would be the same every single time. So no matter what this number is here, if this wasn't 32, let's say it was 80. I don't know, just for example purposes. If it's 80, then that means this number right here becomes 80. So either way, what that means is we're going to take 80 times 1, and 80, which is 80, and 80 divided by 2.2 is 36.4. So that would be my answer if I used 80. But every single time, I'm always going to take that number times 1 and then divide by 2.2. So you're always taking whatever your weight is in pounds and dividing it by 2.2. So really, if that's kind of an easier thing to remember, that all I have to remember is to take my weight and divide it by 2.2, that's all you have to do. In fact, if you guys flip over your conversion charts and look on that formula side, just underneath where we were in chapter 13, just a little while ago, go down to the very bottom, and you can see the last two conversions. The second to the last one says to convert pounds to kilograms, and it reminds you that all you have to do is take your number of pounds and divide it by 2.2. So if you need to, that's what we're going to be using here very often here in chapter 14. So you may want to either highlight that or star that. I know just underneath it says the opposite, to convert kilograms to pounds, but we're not going to do that very often. Although you can see it's just the opposite. In here, our focus is to get everything into kilograms so we can apply it to these dosage questions. So that's all we have to remember is divide by 2.2. Divide by 2.2. So go over to some of the examples over on page 285, and you can see in that practice 1, we've got patients' weights in pounds, and then we need to convert those to kilograms. So we've got number 1, patient who weighs 14 pounds. If they're 14 pounds, again, all I need to do is take that 14 and divide it by 2.2, and 14 divided by 2.2, for those of you guys practicing with me, does give you 6.36. As far as rounding these goes, as far as rounding these, what we're going to do on the final exam, you guys round however you all choose. If somebody took that and said, oh, that's about 6.4 kilograms, would I mark that correct? Absolutely. Again, just like on the midterm, guys, I'm not going to, the only place I'm going to be real particular on your rounding is on the rounding section. So in these particular questions, you know, if you gave me 6.36, 6.4, if you took it a step further and said 6.363, whatever, that's okay. Not a big deal. You've got the correct answer. On something that you do get a decimal like this on, though, at least have a decimal place. So what I mean by that, don't round it to the nearest whole number. Would I mark 6 correct? Yeah, because you rounded it correctly. However, we want to make sure we're being a little bit more precise in these questions because we are dealing with medications, and we want to make sure patients are getting an accurate amount. So because 6.36 and 6.4 are very close, that's why they're both correct. So 6, let's not use just whole numbers. Let's go ahead and make sure we're using something along these lines where we at least have something after the decimal. Unless you get something that doesn't give you a decimal, like number 2, I believe if we take 55 divided by 2.2, that's what number 2 is, 55 divided by 2.2, gives you an even 25. So obviously that's acceptable because that's the answer. There's no decimal behind that. But anything that gives you a decimal, at least if you have to round it, because it's one of those repeating decimals, give me at least 1 or 2 places after the decimal, and you can just stop there, and that's okay. So that was number 2. And again, you guys, you can see we're doing the exact same thing in all of these. If we need to look at number 3, if I have 27 pounds to get it to kilograms, whoops, not what I meant to do there. If I need to get that to kilograms, I simply just take that, divide by 2.2, and 27 divided by 2.2 is about 12.27. And you guys can see that if you're following along there. That's supposed to be a decimal. 12.27. Okay, so in all these, and the rest of those on practice 1, you can see that that's what you're going to be doing. Number 4, it's 98 divided by 2.2. Number 5 is 40 divided by 2.2. And all of those will give you that answer in kilograms. And that's how we get that. But if you move on down to the bottom of that page, on page 285 there, in practice 2, you can see that in some cases, we may have to take into account every ounce of that child or of that patient's body weight. So in some cases, we're weighing them not just, in how many pounds they are, we're actually incorporating their pounds and their ounces. So like number 1, the patient isn't just 14 pounds, he's 14 pounds, 8 ounces. So maybe he or she is taking a particular medicine that we need to be very specific on exactly how much they weigh. So we're even weighing their extra amount of ounces that they weigh too. So this is a little bit different. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to first, yes, to convert to kilograms, we have to divide by 2.2. But what do I divide by 2.2 here if it's 14 pounds, 8 ounces? For those of you guys that are thinking that I would take 14.8 and divide it by 2.2, that's actually incorrect. What we have to think here is, okay, yes, the patient is 14 pounds, so he's 14 point something. You're right with that. He's 14 point something pounds. So we have to think, okay, how many ounces makes up an entire pound? If you're unsure, that is on your chart in the weight category. It does say that 1 pound is 16 ounces. So if a full pound is 16 ounces, then that means that patient number 1 is 14 and a half pounds, because 8 ounces would be half of that 16. And just to kind of give you guys a visualization on what I'm talking about, this patient is 14 pounds, and I'm just going to write this out. He's 14 pounds, 8 ounces. Again, since a full pound is 16 ounces, that 8, we know 8 is half of 16, so he is technically 14 and a half pounds, or in other words, 14.5 pounds, if you think about that, because his ounces make up half of a pound. So we're actually going to use the decimal 14.5 here. That one's a little bit easier. We're going to take 14.5, but and just finishing number 1, it's that decimal, so he's still in pounds. All we've done is take that ounces and make it a decimal. So he's 14.5 pounds. It's that number that I'm going to take and divide by 2.2 to figure out exactly what this patient weighs, and 14.5 divided by 2.2 is about 6.59. So a little bit different than the comparison of the patient from number 1 at the top of that page who was just 14 pounds. 14 by itself converted to kilograms was 6.36. This patient, since we incorporated his other half of the pound that he weighed, he's actually 6.59 kilograms, which means he's going to have to take a little bit more than patient in the earlier example. So what I was just getting ready to say is that 8 ounces may be a little bit easier, because I know 8 is half of 16, so that's easy. That he or she, I keep saying he, but he or she weighs 14 and a half pounds. Well, what does that mean for ones like number 2? Number 2, I have a patient who's 22 pounds, 5 ounces. Well, 5, okay, where do I get the decimal in this case? Here's an easy way to think about this. When you're looking at a patient who's pounds and ounces, what you're going to have to do for a brief second is look at that ounces as if you're looking at it as a fraction out of a total of 16, since 16 ounces is what makes up a total pound. And I know you guys hate fractions, and you guys are all probably groaning right now saying, oh, we're dealing with fractions again. Not necessarily. All we're doing is we're looking at it for a brief second as a fraction. But then we're going back to what we did in chapter 6 and taking that fraction away. Let's turn it into a decimal so that we can go ahead and complete this. So 5/16, remember, turning a fraction into a decimal is top divided by bottom. So numerator divided by denominator. So I'm going to take 5 divided by 16 to get the decimal in this case. So this child is 22.3125. That's the decimal I received on that one when I took 5 divided by 16. So there's the decimal I'm going to use, but that's what that patient weighs still in pounds. 22 pounds, 5 ounces is the same thing as 22.3125 pounds. So what I have to do, and always will I have to do this, to convert to kilograms, I'm going to take that number, divide by 2.2, and when I do that, let's see, what was it, 22.3125 divided by 2.2 gives me about 10.14. So our patient here weighs about 10.14 kilograms. I'm just doing a couple more just to make sure we feel pretty comfortable with this. Like in number three, I have a patient who is 16 pounds. Oh, let me just write that out. 16 pounds, 4 ounces. And again, let's just real briefly look at that 4 ounces out of the total of 16. Okay, so we know he's going to be 16 point something, because that's the full amount of pounds here. That's where that number in front of the decimal comes from. But 16 point what? Let's turn that fraction into a decimal. 4 divided by 16 gives me 0.25. So this particular patient is 16.25 pounds. It's that number that I'm going to take and divide by 2.2 in order to convert this to kilograms. So 16.25 divided by 2.2 gives me 7.39 in that example there. For those of you guys working with me on that one. Let's just do one more just to make sure we feel pretty good with that. I'm looking down to number 4. So number 4 is that patient is 31 pounds and 6 ounces. So once again, what I'll have to do is just temporarily look at this as a fraction. That this person's going to be 31 pounds and some decimal behind it. So it's 31 point something. So we take that 6 divided by 16. So this person is 31.375 pounds. It's that number that I will use to divide by 2.2. So when I do that, divided by 2.2 to get to my kilograms, they are about 14.26 kilograms. So not a whole lot different than the practice 1, what we were doing above. When you just get a patient who weighs a whole number in pounds, then simply just take that whole number and divide by 2.2, which is why in all of practice 1, like in number 1, we took 14 divided by 2.2. Number 2, it was 55 divided by 2.2. Number 3 was 27 divided by 2.2. But if you do get a patient who weighs pounds and ounces, just temporarily, it's just an intermediate step. Look at those ounces out of 16, convert that to a decimal, and then that's the number we use to divide by 2.2. So we do the same thing that we did above. We just have that one intermediate step that, again, we need to turn it into a decimal first to get those ounces into a decimal. So let me show you what these questions will look like. These questions on your test, on your final exam, will look very similar to what you guys can see on page 288. So go ahead and move over to page 288. All these practice problems are on these two pages, 288 and 289. So there's a couple different types of questions here. No matter what, we are always going to be given a patient's weight. Okay, so we know what our patient weighs in pounds, and sometimes pounds and ounces. So we know that's what we're going to have to do, is what we've been doing thus far, is we're going to have to take that weight and convert it to kilograms. Because somewhere on that medication, on that label, it says that that patient can have so many milligrams of that drug for every 1 kilogram that they weigh. So like in number 1 says that we have a patient who weighs 8 pounds, 10 ounces. So I'm going to go ahead and put that up here, 8 pounds, 10 ounces, little baby. That baby has to take this medication. On the drug label it says that they can take 15 milligrams per kilogram over 24 hours. As we get into later problems, that whole sentence there is going to be really important. That this patient can take 15 milligrams per kilogram. So again, for every 1 kilogram that they weigh, they're going to take 15 milligrams of that for each. But also what's relevant in this question is that it says over 24 hours. Oh, whoops, if I could, spell correctly. Over 24 hours. That's going to come in later. You'll notice that the 2 questions underneath that on number 1 says, what is the weight in kilograms, which we're going to do right now, and then it says, what is the daily dose? And it's called the daily dose because this dose that we were given, 15 milligrams per kilogram, I was told to take that over 24 hours, which we know 24 hours makes up a full day. So that's the dose I'm taking in this entire day. I'm not taking it multiple times throughout the day. I'm taking this in my full just day-long period. So that's why this is referred to as a daily dose. Well, let's figure out what that daily dose is. So patient weighs 8 pounds, 10 ounces. So what we've been doing so far, let's convert that to kilograms by once again looking at that 10 ounces out of 16. So when I take 10 divided by 16 to get my decimal, I get 0.625. So this person is 8.625 pounds. But again, to get that fully into kilograms, we divide by 2.2. So 8.625 divided by 2.2 gives me about 3.92. And again, 3.9 would be just fine if you're just rounding it to 1 after the decimal. But this is what they weigh in kilograms, which means my patient, this baby, this infant, can take 3.92 times whatever my dosage is. So we're going to do that every single time. Like in the example I gave you earlier, that, whatever the dosage is, like in this example, it's 15 milligrams per kilogram. That's what my dosage is. So a patient that weighed only 1 kilogram would only have to take that 15 milligrams. Whereas if they weighed twice that, then they're going to have to take twice the amount of the dosage. So they would end up taking 30. Or if they weighed 3 times that amount, they would have to take 3 times the dosage, which would end up being 45 in this question. And you guys can see where I'm going with this. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to end up multiplying. So I just take whatever I got as far as my weight goes, so my 3.92, and multiply it by my dosage. So 3.92 times 15 is what I'm going to do here in order to figure out what this child can take over 24 hours, just like the whole sentence or the whole recommendation from the drug label told me. So my patient can take 3.92 times 15, can take about 58.8 milligrams over 24 hours. So what happens here is the dosage that's given to us, that 15 milligrams per kilogram, is more of like a generalized dosage, meaning that any patient taking this drug can take 15 milligrams for every kilogram that they weigh. And it's on there because I don't know what every patient weighs, and I expect that to be calculated later. So different patients, like if I had a patient that was heavier and maybe weighed 10 kilograms, then they can take 10 times that amount. If I had another patient taking the same medication that weighed 20 kilograms, they can take 20 times that amount. So we're always going to do the same things in every single problem. We're going to have the same steps. Same steps across the board, no matter what the question says. Every time, step 1, and let me just write this out here. Hold on. Let's see. Every single time, step 1, let me write that. Step 1 is going to be to convert pounds to kilograms. Every time. Convert your pounds to kilograms. And I'll just abbreviate. Whereas step 2 is also going to be the same every single time. Once we've gotten that weight into kilograms, it's going to be to take that weight, so whatever I got, and I'm going to just put it in parentheses here, whatever I got in kilograms, I'm going to take that weight and then multiply it by my dosage, whatever that dosage is. And don't forget, whatever my dosage is, whatever says milligrams per kilograms. Step 3 is going to be different from question to question. So I'm not going to write step 3 down here, simply because it always depends on what that says after the dosage. After the dosage, it's either going to tell me that I can take that dosage every 24 hours, so that would be a daily dose, or I can take that dosage every 6 hours, every 12 hours, 3 times a day, and that makes it an individual dose. And you can see what I mean if you take a look at number 2. Number 2 says our patient's weight is 12 pounds, 4 ounces. And then we've got the recommended dose, but let's go ahead and let's take step number 1 out of the way here. Let's convert those pounds to kilograms. So again, because this person weighs pounds and ounces, let's look at it out of 16. So 4 divided by 16 would give me 0.25. So this person is 12.25 pounds. But I need to take that and divide by 2.2 to figure out what they weigh in kilograms. And 12.25 divided by 2.2 gives me about I'm just going to round it up here, 5.57. I always like going 2 places after the decimal, but if you gave me 5.6, that's totally fine. Okay, so we've got a patient, and let me just get this out of the way so I don't have too much on the screen here to be confusing. We do have a patient that is 5.57 kilograms. We just know, and horrible decimal, but you guys get the idea. 5.57 kilograms. The next step is to take a look at that label. And the label, and breaking that down, it does say that they can take 100 milligrams per kilogram, so per each kilogram that they weigh. But it says every 12 hours. So whatever dose I calculate here, my patient is going to be able to take that every 12 hours, meaning I'm going to have to take it a couple times in a day, which is why in number 2, it's asking me it says what is the individual dose, and it's called an individual because I'm taking it multiple times in a day. It's not considered a daily dose. So in going ahead and taking care of step 2, we take our weight every time and multiply it by the dosage. So in this example, I'm going to take 5.57 and multiply it by 100. And again, I'm doing that because our patients can take, if it says 100 milligrams per kilogram, for every kilogram that they weigh, they need to take 100 of those milligrams. So our patient weighs almost 6 kilograms, so they're going to take almost 6 times that amount. So that's what we do, is we take 5.57 times 100, and that gives me 557. So they're going to take 557 milligrams, and how often? Just as the dosage says, they're going to take it every 12 hours. So in some questions, you may see a second part to the question. If I came in later into number 2 here and I said, not just what is the individual dose, which is what we just calculated, here it is, 5.57 milligrams is what we're taking every 12 hours. But if I said, okay, what's the daily dose? Could we figure that out based on this information right here? We could, because 557 milligrams every 12 hours, well, I'm taking that a couple times in a day. How often? Every 12 hours is twice a day. And we get that because I know that with a 24-hour day, there's 24 hours in a day. So if I'm going to divide this up into 12-hour increments, 24 hours divided by 12 hours would be 2 times. So that's how we can get that if we're told to take that amount every so many hours. We just take our 24 and divide by that. So they're going to take this twice in a day. And what we can do is if you really need to kind of think about that, I'm going to take this medication, this amount, 557 milligrams, and then I'm going to wait another 12 hours and take that same amount again. So I'm going to end up taking it only twice before the day is over. So if I ask for the daily dose, if I'm taking this amount twice in a day, I can always just multiply that by 2 to figure out the daily dose, and we would get 1,114. 1,114. I know the question didn't ask me that, but some questions may ask for both. So let's take a look at one that does. One that's very, very similar to that. Let's see here. I'm trying to get this out of the way. Okay, I'm going to leave those steps up there. One that's kind of similar to that. I'm going to hold off on one like number. One that's similar to what we just did, that asked for the individual dose first, and then is going to come in and ask for the daily, is like number 7. Look on page 289 and look at number 7. Some of the ones that we skipped, I'm going to go back to it, because those are going to ask me the questions in an opposite order, and I'll show you what we do on those. So this one's very similar to number 2. Number 7 says that the nurse is to administer a recommended dosage of garamycin 2 milligrams per kilogram every 6 hours. Child weighs 42 pounds. Okay, step number 1, let's get that out of the way first. 42 pounds, we take 42 divided by 2.2 to get it to kilograms. So divide by 2.2, that gives me 19.09. 19.09 is what they weigh in kilograms. So there's that out of the way. Always, number 2, I'm going to take that 19.09 and multiply it by the dosage. In this question, it said to take 2 milligrams per kilogram. So there's my dosage. But how often? Sorry, my handwriting's terrible. 2 milligrams per kilogram every 6 hours. So this is, when I multiply that 19.09 times 2, let's do that, 19.09 times 2, that means my patient, I'm eliminating this generalization. I'm eliminating the general part of this dosage because I know what my patient weighs in kilograms. So they're going to have to take 19.09 times that amount. So they take 38.18 milligrams. And how often? Every 6 hours. So every 6 hours in this day-long period, I'm going to end up taking 38.18 milligrams, or my patient is. So again, how many times that adds up to is, if we think in a 24-hour day, taking that in 6-hour increments, I'm going to end up taking that 4 times. 24 divided by 6 gives us 4. And you can actually think that out if you were to draw out, 24 hours or 24 little tally marks, and then show that I've taken this medication already. I'm going to have to wait another 6 hours, then take it again, wait another 6 hours, then take it again, and then wait another 6 hours and take it again. You'll see that you end up in this 24-hour period, you're going to end up taking it 4 times. So what that means, because this question is now asking me, okay, well then what is the daily dose? What we just calculated was the individual, because the individual is what you're taking multiple times in a day. I'm taking that every 6 hours. But to figure out what I have to take on a daily period, I'm going to end up, because I'm taking that amount 4 times, I'm going to take this and multiply it by 4. So 38.18 times 4 would give me about 152.72. And I know number 7 says round to the nearest whole number, so it'd be about 153 if you were doing so. But I don't have anything like that on the final, so you could just give me the decimal. But that's what we'd end up taking on number 7. And that's the difference between the individual and the daily dose. And in some cases, it may ask you this backwards. And let me show you what I mean by asking it backwards. Go back over to, let's say, page 288 and look at number 5. What happens in ones like number 5 is it's going to give us the daily dose. It says, you can see there where it says the ordered dose, it says ampicillin 30 milligrams per kilogram per day. So I know it's going to be a daily dose. Okay, so what we calculate first is the daily. Then from something else, we're going to have to get the individual. So let's take a look at this one. So we've got a patient who weighs 22 pounds. So let's take care of number 1, step number 1 here. 22 pounds, I know divided by 2.2, that's going to end up giving me 10 kilograms. I know that this patient weighs 10 kilograms. So what that means is my patient can take 10 times the amount of the dosage. The dosage, which says 30 milligrams per kilogram. And again, it says every day, or per day, which is the same thing as every day, per day. So what we do is we take, just like step number 2 says, take 10 times 30, because my patient can take 10 times that amount. He or she is going to take 300. 300 milligrams per day is what they're going to end up taking. So that's why it's the daily dose, because that's the amount we take in an entire day-long period. But how can we get the individual dose then? The individual dose is going to come from the rest of the question. It says, the recommended dose from the drug label says to take 25 to 50 milligrams per kilogram per day, but it says in equally divided doses every 8 hours. So I already know that that's what I need to take per day, is this 300 milligrams. But that recommendation is saying, don't take it all in one sitting. Divide it up. Divide it into every 8 hours. So here's what we're going to do, the opposite of what we just did in number 7. In this case, this has given us the daily dose already. Every 8 hours, how many times is that? We'll still figure that out based on our 24 divided by how many hours. Looks like we're going to need to take our individual dose 3 times. Not the 300 3 times, because that's the daily dose. That's what I'm going to end up taking in the full day. But it's asking me to divide this up into these 8-hour increments. So what I have to do here in number 5 is I take this and divide by 3, which means I'm going to end up taking 100 milligrams every 8 hours. And then it'll eventually, since I take that every 8 hours, eventually it will give me my daily dose of that 300. So, like I said, in some questions you just have to watch out that sometimes you may be given that individual first, and then you're just going to have to multiply to get the daily. Or sometimes you might be given the daily, like in number 5, and then therefore you'll have to divide to get the individual. So you just have to kind of pay attention to how that question is worded. So I hope that helped. I hope you guys can see what I mean by that in these questions. If you guys have any questions at all, please let me know. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to finish up number 5. Number 5 does say, does the doctor's order fit within the recommended safe dosage guidelines? The answer there would be yes, because the doctor's order was 30 milligrams per kilogram per day, and the recommended dose was 25 to 50 per kilogram per day. So it matched up there. That 30 fell right in between that 25 and 50. So it does fall within that recommended safe guideline. So pay attention. You may see a question like that on the final exam too. But if you have any other questions, let me know. If you need me to send you another video, I'd be glad to. Just shoot me an email if you guys need anything. But I hope this helped. All right. Have a good day.